Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our second lesson in our first unit of study, which is understand, and our learning target is compute. Compute is a mathematical term that just means to figure out, to calculate. Unit rate is a vocabulary that we're going to talk about within this lesson. Ratios, you know from the first lesson. Fractions is something you should have been talked about in 5th grade. And then different units, that means different measurements like miles, hours, students, teachers. So you can calculate unit rates associated with ratios. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is what is a rate. A rate is a ratio of two quantities measured in different units. For example, we have 4 participants, 2 teams, 5 gallons and 3 containers, 8 burgers, 2 tomatoes. So essentially what we're doing to make a rate is you have 2 numbers with 2 different units. One unit that you may be familiar with in driving in your parents' car is miles per hour. On I-75, the speed limit is 70 miles per hour, or 70 miles in 1 hour. On Richmond Road, it's 55 miles per hour. Another example may be if you're in my first period class, I have 24 students to 1 teacher. That leads us into the term unit rate, and this is one that you need to really be familiar with. This concept of unit rate is one that you need to grasp in order to be successful not only in this lesson, but this entire unit. When you hear the term unit rate, the number that you need to associate that is the number 1. 1 of something. So a unit rate is rates with a denominator of 1, meaning they have a 1 with them, often expressed in the word per. We're going to talk about this in just a second. But when your parents buys a car, one of the things that they may look at is how many miles per gallon does it get. Now, if you live in Estill County and you work in Estill County, you may not be as concerned with how many miles per gallon your car gets. But if you live in Berea, like I do, and you commute or drive to the school every day, you want to look at how much money am I going to actually be spending driving this vehicle. So it makes sense for me to get a car that gets a better gas mileage. My car gets 33 miles per gallon. Okay? Whereas if I could buy what I really wanted, which would be a truck, I would maybe only get 16 miles per 1 gallon of gas. So it would cost me twice as much in gas to drive the truck as it does my car. Another concept is words per minute. I don't know how many of you have Mr. Tiller, but I think that within that class there might be a typing lesson, and you will talk about how many words can you type in 1 minute. One of the other examples that students sometimes forget is driving. Miles per hour, as we talked about driving on I-75. If you drive the speed limit, which is 70 miles per hour, that means in 1 hour you should drive, or will drive, 70 miles. Okay? That's what this means. When you hear the word per, it's talking about one of the unit that follows the word. So, 1 hour. Okay, we're going to do a couple of these together, and then you're going to have to answer some of them on your own. So make sure you're understanding what it is that we're actually answering. This question says, 6 friends have pizza together. The bill is $63. What is the cost per person? Now, something that we use in 7th grade that I think you all used in 6th grade is cubes. And cubes is circle your numbers, underline your question. So you have 6 friends, and I know you can't see this, but it may help you when you answer your question on your own to pause the video and maybe write down your numbers. So we have 6 friends. Okay. We have a bill of $63. Now at this point, you have a rate because you have 2 numbers and you have 2 units. 1 unit is friends, the other is dollars. Okay. What is the cost per person? Now, what we want to make sure we're doing is understanding what the word per means. Remember from our previous page, the word per means 1. So what is the cost for 1 person? That's your goal. 1 person. Now, as I go through these with you, this is the same process you need to take to answer these questions in just a minute. Since the question asked the cost per person, 1 person, remember, the cost should be first or in the numerator. So the way we set this up is we had 2 numbers. Whatever unit comes after the word per goes in the denominator. Okay? So per person. In our 2 units, we're talking about friends. So we have 6 friends. So we've used this number. The only other number is the $63. Now, here we have a rate. Think about how I set this up. I put the friends on the bottom because it said per person. Since unit rates always have a denominator of 1. Now, denominator is a word dealing with a fraction that is talking about the bottom number. So the denominator is talking about this bottom number. Rewrite the rate so the denominator is 1. Okay, so I got to make this 6 a 1. Now this is very simple. What you want to do is we have the rate of $63 and 6 friends. Think about how can I make this 6 a 1 and I can't subtract 5. The only other way would be to divide it by itself. Anything divided by itself is equal to 1. Okay? Anything divided by itself is equal to 1. But what you do to 1, you have to do to the other. So I've got to divide this top by the same number. It will always be the same number. Now 63 divided by the 6 friends is 10.5. Now, 10.5, we're talking about money. When you go to Walmart, they don't tell you you owe the cashier $10.5. It's $10.50. We can add a 0 there. Okay? So let's talk about what does this mean in context of the problem. $10.50 is how much each person had to contribute to pay for the pizza that cost $63. Okay, so each person had to pay $10.50. Now let's back up for a second and let's review this question. 6 friends have pizza together. The bill is $63. What is the cost per person? The first thing I did was I wrote down my two numbers, the 6 and the 63. Okay? Since it said per person, I know that the number associated with per is 1. So I know that that number has to go in the denominator. Okay? And I put the other number on top. Now this at this point is called a rate. But your question wants to know the unit rate. So we've got to make this 6 a 1. To make it a 1, you always divide it by itself. Always. So once you make it to this point, what you need to understand is you got to divide both of them by whatever the bottom number is. So we have 6 divided by 6, which is 1, and 63 divided by 6, which is $10.50. I had to divide the top by 6 because I divided the bottom by 6. Now what I would like for you to do is do not forget your units. So $10.50, 1, and you can write person if you would like. Okay? Now, let's look at this one. I would like for you to pause this, see if you can answer it. We're going to come back and I'm going to go over it with you. Okay, 60 cupcakes are at a party for 20 children. All right, so I'm going to write down my numbers. Okay, so 60 cupcakes are at a party for 20 children. All right, got my two numbers written down. My question, how many cupcakes per person? Per person. So the word per, you need to be thinking of 1. So what you want to do is you got to say, well, that person has got to be in the denominator. So which one is persons? The children or the cupcakes? Hopefully you said children. So I've got 20 in the denominator, or the bottom number. 60 has got to go in the numerator. Okay? Now from here, what you want to do, you got to get per person, 1. Remember, you got to make this bottom number a 1. To do that, what you have to do is divide it by itself. So I'm going to divide the bottom by 20. And you can go to your calculator and do 20 divided by 20, or if you're not real sure about division, 20 divided by 20 is going to give you 1. $60. Remember, you got to divide it by 20 as well. 60 divided by 20 is going to be 3. Okay? Now, what does these mean? What's our units? The 60 was cupcakes, so it's 3 cupcakes for 1 child or person. Now, which one does that make the answer? A. Okay? Think about the strategies that I'm doing if you miss this one. Okay, there's a little bit of a glare on this one, so I'm going to read it for you. It says, John's car can travel 94.5 miles on 3 gallons of gas. How many miles per gallon can the car travel? Pause the video and answer your question. The two numbers that I have in this one is 94 and 5/10 miles and 3 gallons of gas. Now go to your question. How many miles per gallon? Remember per, you're thinking the number 1. So 1 gallon. So whatever the gallons are has got to go in the denominator. So for us, it's the 3. If 3 goes in the denominator, 94.5 goes in the numerator. Now, your goal is to make this 3 a 1. To do that, you divide it by itself. So you divide that by itself. 3 divided by 3 is going to give you 1. So 1. 94.5 divided by 3, it'll be 30 something. 31.5. Now, I have forgotten my units. Try to remember your units. 31.5 miles, 1 gallon of gas. So, John's car can travel 31.5 miles on 1 gallon of gas. So your answer should have been C. Now this question here, look that we have changed from a decimal to a fraction. That's something that you should be able to do as a 7th grader. Second thing, MPG is an abbreviation for miles per gallon. Number 3. Number 3 says a snake can slither 240 feet in half a day. How many feet can the snake move in an hour? Let's pause the video, work the problem out, and solve it. Okay, so we have 240 feet. And then we have half a day. Now, the question says, how many feet can the snakes move in an hour? Okay, so that changes things. It wants to know how far it can go in 1 hour. But I don't have hours as my units. So the question is, would I change feet or would I change half a day? The only one that makes sense is to change half the day. So we need to think of, well, how many hours are there in a day? So there's 24 hours in a day. How many hours is half of that? And that's 12. So for this one, we have 12 hours that we're converting that half a day to. So our question is, how many feet can the snake move in an hour? So hours has to go on the bottom. So we have 12, and we have 240. Now at this point, you should understand this is a rate, because we're talking about feet and hours. We're trying to get it to a unit rate, which is having a 1 in the denominator. So how do we change the 12 to a 1? And we cannot subtract 11. We only can divide. So we're going to divide it by itself. You're always just going to divide that number by itself. 12 divided by 12 is 1. 240. You divide that number by the same thing you did here, which is 12. And 240 divided by 12 is 20. Well, what does this mean? Okay, look at your units. 20 is on top with 240, so it's feet. So 20 feet in 1 hour. So your correct answer should have been B. Number 4. So you can see it. Okay, number 4 says there are 5 chaperones at a dance of 100 students. How many students per chaperone are there? Pause the video and answer your question. Okay, the two numbers that you have with this problem is 5 chaperones and 100 students. The question says, how many students per chaperone? How many students per chaperone? So you should think 1 chaperone. Since we're talking about 1 chaperone, those have to go on the denominator. So the 5 has got to go in the denominator. The 100 would go in the numerator. You need to make this a 1. To do that, you divide it by itself. So you divide this by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. You divide the 100 by 5 because it's the same thing as you divided the other number by. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Now I don't have my units, so I don't know what this means. 20 students, 1 chaperone, or 20 students per chaperone. And that is D. Number 5. The recipe calls for 6 cups of flour for every 4 eggs. How many cups of flour are needed for 1 egg? Pause the video and solve. All right, the two numbers that I have in my problem is 6 cups of flour and 4 eggs. My question is, how many cups of flour are needed for 1 egg? So per egg. So I know that eggs needs to go on the bottom or in the denominator. 6 would go on top. Now I got to make this 4 a 1. I divide it by itself. I got to divide the 6 by 4 as well. 6 divided by 4 is 1.5. 1.5 over 1 doesn't mean anything without your units. So 1.5 cups of flour for 1 egg, or 1.5 cups of flour per egg. Last one. Pause the video and solve it. Okay. Sarah rode her bike 14.25 miles in 3/4 of an hour. What is Sarah's unit rate in miles per hour? So we're talking about two things. We still have two numbers. We have 14.25 miles. And we have 3/4 of an hour. Too often, students automatically see fractions and immediately say, well, I don't know what to do. But what we need you to understand is you're going to use the same strategies that we've taught you throughout this whole lesson. So our question says, what is Sarah's unit rate in miles per hour. So per hour, so hours has to be on the bottom. And miles would have to be on the top. Now, we're going to use the same process. We are going to say, well, I've got to make 3/4 of 1. How do I do that? Well, the way that I do that is divide it by itself. So I'm going to divide this by 3/4, and I'm going to divide this by 3/4. Now, 3/4 divided by 3/4. Even if you don't understand fractions, you should understand anything divided by itself is equivalent or equal to 1. So we know that this has to be a 1 here. Next is 14 1/4 divided by 3/4. I'm going to show you on your calculator what you can do. So we have 14 1/4. So 14 ABC, 1 ABC, 4, divided by 3 ABC, 4. Okay, we have 14 1/4 divided by 3/4. I will say, get used to using your calculator, because in 7th grade we are going to be learning how to solve these by hand, because this is a new standard in 7th grade. It's called complex fractions. So we'll be teaching you how to solve this without a calculator probably around Christmas. So 14 1/4 divided by 3/4, hit enter, and you have 19. Now without units, this doesn't make sense. So we have 19, 14 1/4 was miles, so 19 miles. 1 3/4 was hours. So this person, Sarah, can ride a bike 19 miles in 1 hour, which is B. Now guys, I can't stress to you enough the importance of understanding how to do this unit, or this lesson rather. If you are struggling, or if you need help, please make sure that you are logging in daily to our tutoring sessions. You can ask questions through the email. You can call us between 8 and 3. We are available to help you. So make sure, if you're not understanding, that you ask questions, and that way we can get you to where you need to be. Do not hesitate to reach out to Ms. Banks or myself. Thank you guys.